What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to What Happened to You. I've been on a break from podcasting for a while, and I wanted to explain where I've been, what I've been up to. So this is essentially going to be What Happened to You, me, part 2. I know the first episode that I did of What Happened to You was my story, and so this is going to be an update. And it all sort of started around April of last year. I decided to go back to therapy. Up until that point, I had been to therapy twice right after I went to trial when I was 11, and just hated it because I didn't feel like talking about this stuff anymore, and I didn't want to in the first place. So the settings, it didn't really line up well then, and then I went to therapy again after I started stand-up in New York because I was working for IBM at the time, and they had free therapy sessions. So I was like, all right, I'll try it out, and I didn't have a good, the therapist and I didn't really mesh, and so I stopped, and for 4 years after that, I was just doing stand-up and talking to people about what happened to me and what happened to them on the podcast. And I really felt like, this was it. This was the way to heal. And I think it is, but it's not the only way. And I also think that there are things that you can combine with talking about it, laughing about it, like therapy, that can make the healing process even more effective. And part of why I decided to go back to therapy was because I felt like I was hitting this mental block. I had reached like the mental capacity, maybe my mental limits of processing that I could do just laughing about what happened to me. And, in this podcast, in What Happened to You and the Sebastian Scale Show, like in both of these, I talk about the molestation a lot, and it's not always humorous. When guests come on, we have a lot of conversations that are much more serious, and humor was such a good gateway into these more intense conversations. But I think that part of me sort of didn't want to consider that maybe there were deeper emotions that I wasn't really getting into, or maybe, because of how our brains operate, my brain was trying to protect itself from these deeper emotions. I'm not really sure, but I felt like despite talking about this for so long and having done a bunch of healing, I was still exhibiting a lot of mental thought patterns, and I was doing a lot of things that I thought might still be related to the molestation that I didn't want to be doing anymore. And a lot of it stems from people-pleasing tendencies, anxiety about what people think, whether that's in person or online. I was still doing a lot of things that I think I was able to identify as originating because of the trauma, and yet I wasn't able to think my way out of them. Despite how much I'd been thinking and talking about these things, they were still in me, and I didn't know what to do. And so I spoke with a friend of mine, and he recommended this therapist who was a child abuse specific therapist, and she specialized in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which a number of people who have been on the podcast have talked about, and most people say that it was life-changing. I had never done it before, but hearing all of these stories from people, it sounded like something that maybe I could benefit from. So I decided to give this therapist a shot. And the first conversation that we had was a call, and I sort of just, as you can imagine, immediately was like, all right, here's everything that's happened to me. No holding back at this point. I'm a very open book about these topics, and I was articulating to her, her name is Christine, what it was that I was still struggling with. And, one of the things is that it felt like when I look back on the course of my life, like after we went to trial and I was in high school and everyone, and middle school, but like a lot of people knew about the molestation. So I felt like I was always trying to succeed in other areas of my life in an attempt to draw people's attention away from the trauma, from being like the kid who got molested, because it just felt like I thought that people were thinking that when they would see me, and it was something that I didn't want that. I didn't want to be that kid. And so I tried hard in school, and I tried hard in soccer, and I tried hard socially. I was trying very hard to, what it felt like was I was trying to convince people that, like, look, I'm not traumatized. I'm not fucked up. I'm not weird, because look at all these other things that I do well. And I was talking to my therapist about this, and what she said was, what's basically happening when you go through abuse and you have this sort of reaction to it is you're trying to convince the world and yourself that you are still lovable. And she said that, and immediately I started crying. And I was like, you're hired. You are so immediately hired, you magician. It was like she just instantly put into context, like she provided me with an understanding of the actual underlying feeling that I was trying to escape from, which is this feeling of unlovability. Like I'm unworthy of love, which is sometimes a response to childhood trauma, molestation, or other things. You start to think that this is who you are, and you're not worthy of a life outside of this trauma. There's infinite ways that our brains can interpret these scenarios, but it really felt like she hit the nail on the head of why I was behaving the way that I was behaving, that I had never realized. And, my bodily reaction to her saying that was further confirmation that, like, oh yeah, that's how I'm feeling. It's not really that I want to be like considered smart, or I want to be considered good at soccer or socially cool. I just want to be loved. And maybe the molestation made me think that that's not part of my plan. That's not what's in the cards for me. Who knows? But it certainly felt like we had identified the root of worries that I've been having over the course of my life that were still manifesting in my current reality at the time. And, I would post something online and immediately, like, even if I was getting positive feedback from it, my brain would interpret it as they're just saying this because they feel bad and they actually don't like this. It was like my brain was denying external reality because of my internal beliefs. And so right away, like, just registering that, like, kind of being able to identify that internal feeling immediately made it so much lighter. Like, it's still there and it still needs to be released, but it's hard to release something that you're not aware of. And so just becoming aware of it made it, I was excited to work with Christine and with myself, and to know that there is a reality in which I feel lovable, where I don't need to convince the world of anything. I can just exist in my being, and that's enough. And that's available for all of us. And maybe everyone feels like this on some level. And if not, you probably have other things that you feel that are, equally, if not more or less significant to you. We've all got stuff. But just recognizing that this is something that I had been feeling for so long, and that it is possible to heal from that feeling. It just, I was really excited. So we started working together. I saw her once a week, and the first 3 or 4 sessions, we were just talking about all sorts of stuff related to the trauma, other sort of underlying reasons for my behavior. And another thing we would talk about is dreams, and how dreams are basically your subconscious beliefs, your subconscious worries, things that are going on in the background of your mind that are running a large portion of your conscious reality. And some of the dreams that I would have would be like getting called on in class and not knowing the answer, and that having that, the dreams are like in high school, and I'm having that happen now, when I'm like 27, and basically registering that is my subconscious worrying about people in high school, which is the time frame that I was worried about, because that's like right after the trial and everything. I'm worried about them basically seeing through the facade that I was putting on. They were seeing that it's a sham. He's a fake. He is fucked up. He is traumatized. And so in these dreams, I would get called on and I wouldn't know the answer to things, and I would just panic, and like that was my nightmare. People have dreams about getting murdered, and I have dreams about like getting a question wrong in physics. But for me, that in a sense was like the death of the identity that I needed people to think that I was. So various different dream deconstructions, and we really got to figure out a lot of why I am the way that I am. And we started developing different ways of changing and getting back to the way that we all are when we first get here, which is just loved. We are all born into love. We're loved by our mother, our parents, our families. And there's nothing that we had to do to achieve that. We were just born. We were born worthy of love. That's birth worth. The birth worthiness. And we all have that. And that's like also like some of the strongest love, potentially the strongest love available on earth, the love from a mother and a father, etc. But it's something that we didn't have to do anything for. And yet, over the course of our lives, a lot of us begin to feel that we have to do things in order to be worthy of love. And we forget that just being here, we're worthy of existing. Like, how could you be more worthy than being? So trying to remember that there's nothing that you have to do, I have to do, we have to do in order to be worthy of love. And no matter how unlovable I may feel, I am loved. And even though my external reality might be telling me something different, my internal reality isn't allowing me to feel that love, because for whatever reason, I don't feel worthy of it. So really starting to register, okay, these are some of the operating systems that are going on in my brain and body, and these are things that I know that I can heal from. And it's just going to take some work. So eventually we got to the point where we were going to do EMDR. And I actually have my notes from the therapy sessions right here. One of the things that you do when you're getting ready for EMDR is you try to tap into the feelings that exist within you that you no longer want to feel, feelings that you want to heal from. And so one of the things that we did first was we were talking about fear. And we were trying to think of what we should do EMDR about. And so I was thinking, why don't we do it on the most intense moment, which for me was when I told Jim to stop, when we were at his cabin and he got into bed with me and Jamie. And I said out loud, please stop. And in that moment, it was probably the most intense heart beating, fight or flighty feeling that I've felt in my life. So you come up with what's called a positive cognition. And it's basically a phrase that is how you want to feel. And how I had been feeling was, I'm not safe. I don't belong here. And so for this first round of EMDR, we basically, the phrase was, I am safe and I belong. And EMDR is, it's basically what happens is oftentimes people will move a light back and forth and you follow the light with your eyes. And it's meant to allow you to access memories, go back into your memories and recontextualize things. And this was all done, for me at least, with Christine over Zoom. And so I'd heard all of these amazing stories about EMDR, and I loved my positive cognition. But when we actually started doing it, I started feeling the emotions. I started remembering that experience and stepping into what it feels like currently and what it felt like. And I felt like I was there emotionally. And then she started moving her hand back and forth like this. And I just had this major mental block where it felt like I don't know if it was egoic or something, but I was watching her do this and I was like, this has got to be bullshit. There's no way that you moving your hand back and forth across the screen and me following it with my eyes is going to make me feel like I'm safe in this existence. And it totally pulled me out. I was resistant, and even though she was very patient with me, I just felt like it just wasn't working. And I sort of was kind of back in the space and I was remembering what was happening, but I wasn't open to the experience. And so it didn't really work. And I was frustrated after that. We did it a couple of times. You do a pass, which is basically she moves her hand back and forth for like a minute. Then you take a second, you go back in and you do a number of passes. And then you do a debrief. And I just felt like I wasn't able to get there. And I think that that's probably pretty normal for people. It's a tough thing to just be like, have it work immediately. I mean, maybe I hope for people you can just do it once and just immediately it works. But for me, that's not what happened. So we spent the next couple of sessions talking more about things, and it felt like I was resistant to the technique, but also resistant to getting into the actual feelings. And maybe, again, that is just the defense mechanism part of my brain. I'm not sure, but I started working, on opening up myself. I was meditating a bunch, and I would make sure to meditate for an hour before the sessions with Christine, because I think it allowed me to experience reality more fully when we were having our sessions, instead of being in my head about why this probably won't work. So we kept working on things, and eventually we started getting ready to try EMDR again. And one of the things that we had been talking about leading up to this session was the impact that the trial had on me. which is something that, as much as I thought that I had processed, I hadn't really registered the impact of telling my truth and having it be ruthlessly questioned and picked apart. And here's all the reasons why what you're saying, which is your truth, is wrong, and why you're a liar, and why, you're a bad kid for saying all of these things, which is essentially like what the defense attorney was doing. He was explaining to the jury and all the people in the courtroom why what I was saying was a lie. And to have that be the immediate response to me talking about trauma, all this molestation and stuff, it causes you to be very resistant to telling the truth and not trusting that reality will respond in a way that is accepting and embracing of your truth. So we spent a lot of time deconstructing that, and we came up with a new positive cognition that was, I have my notes here, and it is, I am safe, I am supported, my truth is real, I trust my truth, and it is my protector. And that's, it sort of combined the first and second positive cognitions, because telling my truth and having it put me in a position where I felt, super unsafe, even though it caused me to not be molested anymore, it put me into this new situation, which was very traumatizing in its own way. So reprocessing this situation and remembering that I am safe, I trust my truth, and it is my protector, is meant to remind me and to understand in my core that my truth is essential to tell. And so this time I felt way more open. I meditated for a while before the session, and when we started doing it, I was there. I was ready to go. And so we did the first pass. Christine started moving her hand across the screen, and almost immediately I was back in the trial. But I wasn't there from my younger self's perspective. I was behind myself in the courtroom. So my younger self was on the stand, and I was standing behind him as my current self. I couldn't believe how vivid it was. It was like I was like I was back. And everything was frozen in the courtroom. Nobody was moving, but the defense attorneys and prosecuting attorneys were there. Jim was there. Everything, it was more vivid than I had ever remembered it. That was kind of the first pass, and then we did the second pass. I told Christine during the debrief of the first one what had happened, and she was like, okay, great, let's go back in. So we did the second pass, and this time I was looking at my younger self, and he turned around and he looked at me, and I just broke down. It was like I had connected with him, and we hadn't even said anything yet, but it was just this, some sort of a recognition of each other. It's hard to put into words, kind of, but it was very, very real. And when I saw his face, he was so scared and in shock. He was looking at me like, are you seeing this shit? Why do we have to do this? Why am I here? And then I sort of just started thinking to myself. I started thinking all these things that I wanted to say to him. And I wasn't saying them out loud, but I was saying them in my mind, and it felt like he was registering what I was saying. And so I started saying, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. I promise. Just keep going. and I felt very like rushed, like almost like this can't be real. Like, how is this happening? And I felt like it was going to end. So I was like really trying to get this stuff out. And then Christine ended the pass, and I was just crying, and I told her what had happened and how I felt rushed. And she was like, you can stay here. There's no rush here. You take all the time that you need. And so I took a breath, and we went back in, and we did a third pass. And this time my younger self was looking at me, and I was just looking back at him, and I told him that he was loved and that it was all going to be okay. If only you knew what we turned this into. And it just, it was like I was able to say to him what I needed to hear in that moment. It was wild. It was cool too, because he wasn't like, why are you here? How the fuck, who are you? You're me, but 16 years from now? What's happening? Like fortunately my younger self wasn't skeptical of me. And this whole time in my actual reality in my room, I took the call from like literally right here. This is where Christine and I would do our Zoom sessions. But I was just flooded with tears. I was crying so much. But in the EMDR flashback, or I don't know what you would call it, but I was just standing there and reassuring my younger self that it was going to be okay. So we finished that pass, and Christine, I was telling her what happened, and then she was like, "Oh, that's so good. Would you like to get him out of there?" And I was like, "What? Yeah." You can do that? And she was like, you can do anything. This is your memory. And I was like, oh my God. It was so powerful. And so we went back in for the next pass, and I went over to him, and I took his hand, and he stood up. And we walked through this frozen courtroom of all of these people. And we walked out the door, or the courtroom doors, and we went through the hallway into the lobby, and we walked out of the courthouse. And then I don't know how we got here, but there was some sort of like bright light. And when we came to, we were on top of this giant mountain. It was like a flat top of a mountain, and surrounding the flat top was a total drop off, 90 degrees. It was unclimbable. And we were up in this mountain. It felt like we were in Malibu, and we were up like beyond the clouds, and it was a sunny day above the clouds, and it was so quiet. It was almost like we were in space, but on Earth. I know Earth is in space, but it was, you know what I mean? We were so high up, and it felt like nobody could get to us here. It was a total safe space that only my younger self and I could ever be in. And I looked at him, and he was sitting there, and he looked at me, and he was smiling. And I hadn't seen him, he was in total panic and shock up until this point. And there we were, just on the top of this mountain that it was like, here you are safe. And it felt like you can come back here and be here whenever you want to. It'll be here for you. And I'll be here for you forever. And we were just on that mountaintop, just sitting there peacefully in the quiet stillness of the sun and space. Here's the picture that I drew of it after the session ended. And yeah, it was incredible. So that pass ended, and I was just like sobbing, like wailing. It felt like there had been a like loosening of the valve of unsafety, lack of safety, and all of these suppressed feelings just started coming out. And then when we actually got to a place where it was okay, it was like this explosion of emotion. But it was also like simultaneously I was crying so much, but it also felt really good. And so I was crying there, and Christine was silent, and she's very good at like encouraging you to cry, and not, obviously she's a therapist, but she kept saying good. That's great, Sebastian. And I so many times, people say don't cry or whatever it is, and it just, to be encouraged to cry, it really was the perfect thing to hear in that moment. And so I told her about all this whole sequence, and it was, she obviously was thrilled, and I was thrilled, and I felt like I was floating in my current actual reality after this experience. And I to this day, it's one of the most amazing feelings, releases of my life. And I felt like, yeah, like, holy cow, like I'm I'm safe. And sometimes the positive cognition that you come up with before the EMDR is more of just like a intro, and then what comes up are all sorts of other feelings and emotions, sort of how like laughter can be an introduction to the conversations. It was so incredible. And we ended our session, and I felt like I was lighter. And obviously these emotions were suppressed in my body, and so many of them were coming up and out. And so of course I feel lighter, but it was intensely light. It was amazing. So anyway, that was the second EMDR session. So if you're thinking about doing EMDR, or you have done it and it didn't work, I was right there with you, and just keep trying, because it is possible. So we had a couple of sessions after that, and we were, I felt like more of myself than I had ever been. A lot of my relationships with people, like in my everyday reality, I was not worrying about what I was saying, or worrying about what people were thinking, or being on edge as much of potential danger. I just felt safer in my environment. And so we kept going, and we kept talking about other things, and we started talking about feeling like enough, and feeling worthy of love and protection, and a positive cognition that we came up for the next EMDR session was, I am safe in my body. I know and believe that I am always enough as I am. And that one hit hard for sure, because this trial EMDR was in some ways a little bit more cerebral or conceptual. It was like talking oriented. It was very traumatizing, but it wasn't very physically traumatizing. So we started focusing on the feelings of wanting to feel safe in my body. So that was pretty much all we started with. And we got to the session, and we started doing EMDR, and we didn't really plan anything out. It wasn't like the first time where I was like, let's go to the most traumatic moment. It was just like, here's how I want to feel. Let's do it. So we went in, and during the first pass, I was back in Jamie's bedroom, and I was sleeping on the floor, and he was sleeping on his bed, and I saw this happening, and I was my current self, like sort of off to the side on the side of the room, and I saw the door opening, and Jim was coming in, and it was scary to watch from this perspective. I tried to say something, like I was trying to communicate with my younger self, but he was asleep, and I couldn't convey anything to him like I had during the trial EMDR. And so I started panicking, and I didn't know what to do. And then we finished that first pass, and I told Christine what was going on, and she said, hey, it's okay. Just do whatever it is that feels right. And so we went back in, and I saw Jim kneeling over next to my body, my younger self. And he reached his hand out, and he was about to start molesting me. And I felt like paralyzed. I couldn't yell. I couldn't like speak either. I couldn't say anything, and I didn't know what to do. And it was scary. And I knew that I couldn't just stay there and just not say anything and watch this happen. I needed to do something, but I didn't know what to do. And then at a certain point, I was like, fuck it, dude. And I moved. And I went over to Jim, and he was kneeling there. And I kneed him in the head. Like a full-blown knee to the temple. And just thumped him right to the ground. And he was knocked out fully. And it was this crazy thing where when that happened, as soon as I knocked him out, I felt this unraveling of tension in my stomach that was initially like super painful. It was like a contraction and a expansion at the same time. I don't know what it was, but almost immediately it turned into this unraveling of tension that felt incredible. And I was sort of like, not like spazzing out, but like a little bit. And when he hit the ground, my younger self woke up, and he turned over and looked at me, and we made eye contact. And it was so crazy, dude. I didn't... It was a similar feeling to the first time when he looked at me in the trial, when it was just like, whoa, dude, hello again. Me. This is crazy. But yeah, so that was it. We finished that pass, and I was explaining to Christine this pain / relief that I was having in my stomach. And she asked me again, like, do you want to take your younger self out of there? And I was like, yeah, I do. So I took him by the hand, and he stepped over Jim's body, and we left. It was really a perfect thing, because I didn't want to like kill Jim in that moment. I just wanted it to not happen. But I also felt like if I just saved myself somehow, I don't know, if time froze again and I just carried myself out of the room, then it felt like he was going to do it to Jamie. And so I was able to like knock him out, but not kill him, and keep myself safe. And hopefully he gets the message that this is what happens when you try to molest a kid. Obviously, this is all just going on in my mind and body, but it felt like the perfect thing that happened. And we got out of this situation, and I felt like I was sort of like when a cat has like a hairball, like it felt like the tension in my stomach was like going up and out of my mouth, and like it sounds so crazy, but it was so real. It made me feel again that like, okay, I'm safe. I can protect myself now, and it'll never happen again. And when Christine and I were debriefing from this session, it was crazy because we didn't really realize this at the time, but the trial was like the end of the trauma. Obviously, lots of stuff happened after that, but in terms of the peak, intensity, that was sort of the end. And what this last EMDR session was like the beginning. It was the first time the molestation had happened. At least that's what it felt like in my brain. And so we managed to like bookend the trauma. The feelings that I was feeling at the very end, we went through and felt those and recontextualized them, and then we went to the very beginning and were able to convey to my younger self that this is you're safe and that you're worthy of being safe. And like I got you. You don't have to worry anymore. And there's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, I think that's how you pronounce his name, where he's talking about the ear of corn is still the kernel when it's the ear. It's just morphed and it's grown. But the energy, the being, is still the same being. And if you don't heal the part of yourself that went through these traumatic experiences, you end up operating out of thought patterns and belief systems that you developed during the traumatic time period to keep you safe that no longer serve you. And so that's what this felt like, was a explanation to my younger self, who I still am in a bigger body, that this isn't how life is anymore, and it'll never be that way again, and that you are enough, and that you're protected. And it just felt like I was back in my body. This time in particular, it felt like I was safe in this being again, which I didn't even realize I wasn't fully feeling. But the feelings of lightness and security, it was like feeling light and grounded at the same time. I felt like I belonged in my body. And what Christine described this as was a soul retrieval. She was talking about how sometimes in traumatic events, it can become too extreme for our souls. It's too much. And so disassociation happens. And for me, I sometimes would see myself getting molested from a third-party perspective, like from above. And I never really registered that could literally be my soul exiting my body temporarily because it became too intense. And so what these experiences are doing is reconjoining the soul and the body and the mind. It's reminding yourself, reminding. It's mending the mind and the body and the soul, and explaining to yourself that it's okay to come back, that it's okay to be here now. And so I think that lightness was my soul being more back in my body. Which is so sick, dude. It's so cool. It's just, it felt like it made total sense. And it's hard to definitively say that, this is now my whole soul is back in my body. I don't know if it is, but it certainly feels much more back. I feel more back in my body than I ever have. and it feels amazing. So, yeah, that was like, I guess, a 3-month, maybe a 4-month time period. It was a lot. It was some of the most transformative experiences that I've ever experienced. None of that would have happened if I had just sort of shut it down when I was egoically resisting the technique. So I'm glad that didn't happen. But man, what's amazing about this too is the impact that these things have, like on my current experience. Like I feel, safer in my environment. I am trusting people. I'm trusting myself. I'm not worrying anywhere near as much as I used to. And it's still wavy, like it comes and goes, but the general trend is so upward. And there's a quote, I think it was Einstein, who said that the most important decision we have to make as individuals is whether we live in a friendly or hostile universe. And the impacts of this, it makes me feel like I'm living in a safe universe. And that the universe has my back and that I'm protected. I can protect myself and I'm protected by the world. And I think that when we have these things happen to us as kids, or whenever they happen, it can lead us to believe that that's not the case. That we do live in a hostile universe and that we have to be on edge and on guard and ready for whatever it is that's going to happen. But through experiences like this, we can learn and cultivate a sense of safety in our environments that allows us to feel relaxed. And all of that tension that we store and energy we put into trying to protect and defend ourselves, either literally from physical threats or mentally from thought threats or hypothetical threats from the external world, all of this energy is available to us the moment we stop worrying. And it just feels so much better to exist in this space of trust and safety. And there's another quote, I forget who said this, but it's when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if you're perceiving this universe as friendly, you're living in a friendly universe. Vibrationally, you will be attracting things and people that are similar to your vibration. So if you're perceiving the world as hostile, you will see things and come into contact with things that are hostile. And it's not saying that you won't run into dangerous situations even though you're perceiving the universe as friendly. It's just that you don't have to live in a state of fear and spend all of this energy in anticipation of things going wrong. Instead, you can have all of that energy available to you for when things actually go wrong. And then you can respond in the most optimal way possible in the actual reality of the moment and not what you think might happen. So, yeah, dude, it was just an absolute mega trip. And there's so much more to say about all of this stuff. And I've had some other experiences that I'll share down the line, but I just wanted to give an update and let everyone know sort of what's been going on. And I'm going to be starting the podcast up again, and it's I'm trying to figure out how to do it, because I do it all on my own, and it's definitely getting to the point where I want to take it to the next level, with hiring a podcast editor, social media people. I want to have this stuff reach as many people as possible and have it be helpful for everyone who can benefit from it. So yeah, that's what I'm working on currently. So one of the things I've decided to do is start a Patreon, which, for those of you that don't know, Patreon is basically a website where you can create a profile and people can subscribe to see bonus content or really whatever you want to post. But it's like a monthly subscription, and it's a place where you can support creators that you like. And it has taken me multiple years to pull the trigger on this. And I've always been kind of confused as to why. And honestly, in therapy, I started, we kind of got more to the root of what I was afraid of. The guy who molested me would give me gifts, and I started to develop these beliefs, almost like anticipation of ramifications as a result of receiving. It kind of warped my perception of things being given to me, and I felt like if I didn't make sure that somebody knew how much this meant to me, like if I didn't respond or reciprocate at an equal level of what was given, then somehow something bad would happen. Like I would owe them something, which is kind of how I felt with the molestation, where I felt like I owed the guy. Like now, because he got me this, sweet Star Wars action figure, now somehow I'm like not allowed to speak up about being molested because I owe him. So this is also an opportunity to, move through that. And sometimes it feels like we just need to go do the thing that we're afraid to do in order to really understand that there's no danger. And no matter how many people join the Patreon, I'm not going to get molested again, despite what my brain may think. So, I'm going to be posting all sorts of things on the Patreon. I do a lot of things that I don't post online because I get nervous or whatever, which, based on the logic I used seconds ago, would be I should post them. So this is sort of maybe the first step in that. I make music, I sing, and I dance, and so I'll be posting all sorts of stuff that I don't post anywhere else online on Patreon. And I'm going to post an extra episode of the Sebastian Scales Show every month. And What Happened to You will always be free and available. All of the episodes will always be available for everyone. So this is just a way to support the podcast. And if you can't join, it is completely okay. I am just so grateful for you watching and listening. And yeah, join if you'd like to. And if not, it is all good. I'm going to be putting the money towards podcast editors, people that can help get this message out and get this content out to everyone who can benefit from seeing it. So that's the plan. If you'd like to join, the link is in the description of this video or podcast, or you can go to patreon.com/Sebastian Scales, and there's different tiers to choose from. So yeah, this is new for me, and I feel nervous about it, but I've decided that nervousness and fear are not strong enough reasons to not do things that I feel on a deeper level I need to do. So I'm just gonna do it. And I'm so grateful for you listening and for sticking with me and bearing with me in these interesting times of healing and trying to figure out how to be at peace with reality. And I feel safer. I feel safer now than I think I ever have, and it feels really good. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you feel good and safe and worthy of love. And if you don't, you can. No matter how long you felt that way, you can change it. And I feel that it is worth it to change. So, yeah, I love you. Even if you don't feel worthy of it, I do. And I love myself. And I feel more worthy of it than I used to. And it feels good. Okay. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one. Peace.